Brothers and sisters, we are going to be honest with you. When this testimony reached us, none of us could speak for a while. We just sat there. What this young woman experienced inside the holiest city in Islam is something that will shake you to your core. She went to Mecca looking for God. What happened next? Nobody could have written this. Nobody could have planned this. Only Jesus could have done what he did in that hospital room that night. Please watch this with a quiet heart and open ears, and when you finish, tell us where you are watching from. Now listen carefully.
My name is Zainab Mohammed. I am 32 years old. I am a Palestinian Muslim woman from Jerusalem. And what I am about to share is the most painful and the most personal thing I have ever said out loud. I have kept it inside for months. I have cried over it alone in rooms where no one could hear me. I have asked God why it happened, and I have received an answer that I never expected, and that has changed everything about who I am and how I live and what I believe. I went to Mecca for Hajj. I went as a devoted Muslim woman who had saved for years for this journey. I went with faith and with expectation, and with the genuine desire to meet God in the holiest place on earth. I came back a completely different person, not because of what I found in Mecca, because of what found me in a hospital bed in the middle of the night when I was broken and bleeding and had nothing left. This is that story. And I am telling it because I believe there are women who have experienced what I experienced and who are carrying it alone. And I want them to know they are not alone. And I want them to know that the one who found me in that hospital room can find them wherever they are. I grew up in the old city of Jerusalem. If you know Jerusalem, you know what that means. The layers of it, the history pressed into every stone, the particular intensity of a city that three faiths call their own, and that carries the weight of that claiming in everything about it. I grew up Muslim in the city, where being Muslim is an identity that goes far deeper than personal belief. It is community, it is history. It is the language of who your family is, and where you belong in the long story of the place. My faith was genuine. I want to say that clearly, because I think it matters for you to understand who was in that hospital bed when Jesus appeared. Not a woman who had been drifting or doubting or looking for something different. A woman who prayed, who fasted, who read her Quran, who loved her faith with the love of someone who has never had a reason to question it. A woman who had wanted to go to Mecca since she was a little girl, sitting in her mother's lap, listening to the stories of the Hajj that her grandmother had made decades before. I saved for 3 years. It is not easy for a Palestinian woman in Jerusalem to save for Hajj. The logistics alone are complicated by the political situation, the permits, the travel arrangements that ordinary people in ordinary countries do not have to think about. But I saved and I arranged and I planned, and when the day finally came that I put on my ihram and joined the millions moving toward Mecca, I felt the way I imagine a person feels when they have been walking towards something their whole life and the destination is finally visible. I want to tell you about the journey to Mecca before I tell you about what happened there, because the journey itself began to show me things I had not expected to see. I was traveling alone. This was the first unusual thing. Traditionally, a Muslim woman is supposed to travel for Hajj with a mahram, a male guardian. But the rules around this have relaxed in recent years for organized group travel. And I was part of an organized group from Jerusalem. The group was supposed to stay together. In practice, the group was large, and the crowds in Mecca during Hajj are unlike anything that can be prepared for, and staying together in them is easier as an instruction than as a reality. On the first day in Mecca, I became separated from my group. This happened faster than I could have imagined. One moment they were around me, the next the crowd had shifted, and I was alone in a sea of millions of people with my phone, showing no signal, and the noise and the heat and the press of bodies making it difficult to think clearly. I found my way back to the accommodation eventually, but the experience left me shaken in a way I had not expected. Mecca during Hajj is not what the pictures show. The pictures show the beauty, the grand mosque, the Kaaba, the sea of white. What the pictures do not show is the chaos that exists alongside the beauty. The crushing crowds, the heat that is not just weather but a physical force pressing down on everything. The vulnerability of a person alone in a place where alone means something different from what it means at home. I spoke to other women at the accommodation. Women from different countries, Indonesia, Nigeria, Egypt, Pakistan, Morocco. And in those conversations, in the quiet of the evenings, when the day's rituals were done and we were resting, I heard things that disturbed me. A woman from Nigeria told me she had been groped in the crowd during tawaf. She said it had happened multiple times. Hands in the crowd, taking advantage of the press of bodies and the impossibility of identifying anyone in the mass of white ihram garments. She said she had tried to report it and had been told that the crowds made it impossible to investigate. A woman from Indonesia told me something worse. She said that in the area near the Jamarat, the stone-throwing ritual, she had been assaulted by a man who had used the crowd as cover. She was crying when she told me this. She said she had not told her husband because she did not know how he would respond. She said she had finished the Hajj carrying this alone and was going home carrying it alone. An older woman from Egypt who had done Hajj twice before told me quietly that what these women were describing was not rare. She said she had heard similar accounts from women she knew. She said the combination of enormous crowds, the anonymity provided by the ihram, the difficulty of reporting, and the general atmosphere of an overwhelmingly male-dominated space created conditions that some men exploited. She said this with the resigned sadness of someone who has known something for a long time and has not known what to do with the knowing. I listened to all of this, and I felt the particular combination of disbelief and recognition that comes when you hear something that contradicts what you believed about a place you considered sacred. I told myself I would be careful. I told myself I would stay with the group, would not go anywhere alone, would take every precaution. Precautions are not always enough. It was during the evening prayers. The crowd was dense and moving and loud, with the collective sound of millions of people in worship. I had been separated from the people I was near, not dramatically, just the gradual drift that happens in large crowds when the movement of thousands of bodies slowly creates distance between people who were together. 3 men approached me. They had been nearby during the prayers. I had noticed them in the way you notice people who are in your immediate vicinity without paying particular attention to them. They spoke to me in Arabic. At first the conversation seemed ordinary. Fellow pilgrims, the kind of brief friendly exchange that happens constantly in Mecca between strangers who are united by the shared purpose of being there. Then it changed. They moved in a way that positioned me between them and a wall. The crowd around us was dense enough that what was happening was not visible to the people a few meters away. I want to say clearly that what followed was not a misunderstanding or an accident or a case of different cultural norms. It was deliberate, and it was violent, and it was done by men who knew exactly what they were doing and who had chosen the location and the moment with the specific intention of exploiting the conditions that the crowd and the darkness and the anonymity provided. I will not describe the details. I am not going to put the details of what those 3 men did into words that will be read or heard by other people. Because what was done to my body in that place belongs to me and not to a description. What I will tell you is that I fought. I fought with everything I had, and it was not enough. And what they intended to do, they did. And when it was over and they were gone, I was on the ground in a city of millions of people and completely alone and in a pain that was physical and was also something that physical pain does not fully cover. I do not know how long I was there. I know that eventually I was able to move. I know that I found my way, slowly, in a state that I cannot describe adequately, through streets that were full of people, none of whom knew what had just happened to me, to a medical facility. I know that I told a female nurse what had happened in a voice that did not sound like my voice. I know that I was examined and that the examination was done with kindness and that I was given treatment and that I was eventually moved to a hospital room where I was given a bed and where the door closed and I was alone with the pain and the silence and the dark. I want to tell you about that night because that night is the center of everything. That night is the reason I am here telling you this story. I lay in that hospital bed in Mecca, and I was in pain, and I was in a state of shock that made the pain feel both very close and strangely distant simultaneously. I was crying, not dramatically, the quiet, continuous crying of a person who has been through something and whose body has found crying as the only available response. I was not praying in any formal sense. I was not reciting anything. I was simply lying there in the dark, with the tears running down the sides of my face onto the pillow and the pain in my body, and a feeling inside me that I am going to try to describe accurately. The feeling was abandonment. I had come to the holiest place on earth to meet God. I had saved for 3 years. I had made the journey with all the faith I had. I had put on the white garment and performed the rituals and prayed and sought and reached. And in the holiest place on earth, 3 men had done what they did to me in a crowd of millions while the prayers continued around us. And now I was in a hospital bed, and the God I had come to meet was not in the room. That is what I felt. He was not in the room. The room was empty of everything except pain, and the sound of my own crying, and the distant hospital noises of a building full of other people in other kinds of trouble. And then the room was not empty. I cannot tell you exactly when it changed. I can tell you that it changed. That the quality of the air in that room shifted in a way that had nothing to do with any physical change I could identify. Something entered the room, a presence, warm in the way that I have since heard others describe, and that I now understand is simply what his presence is like. Warm the way a room is warm when someone who loves you has just walked in. Except more than that, except deeper than that, except in a way that reached places in me that nothing had ever reached before. He was there. I knew it was him before he said anything. I knew it the way you know certain things in your body, before your mind has caught up, with a certainty that did not require processing or evaluation. He was there, and he was looking at me, and the looking had a quality that I am going to try to describe carefully, because it was the most important part. He knew what had happened to me, not in the general way that an all-knowing God knows all things, in the specific, personal, present way that someone knows something when they were there when it happened. He had been there, in the crowd, in the dark, in the place where 3 men did what they did. He had been there, and he knew, and the knowing was in the way he looked at me, and the looking did not have a single trace of the thing I feared most in. That moment, which was shame. There was no shame in his looking. There was grief, real, specific, personal grief for what had been done to me. There was love. There was the particular quality of attention that says you matter, specifically and irreplaceably, and what was done to you matters, and I am here. He spoke to me. Not in Arabic, not in any language I can put a name to, but understood completely. He spoke about who he was. He spoke in a way that was not a theology lecture or a list of claims to be evaluated, but simply a revealing. The way a person reveals themselves when they trust you enough to be fully known. He showed me who he was and who he had always been, and the showing was its own proof. You do not encounter something this real and mistake it for a dream. He spoke about what had happened to me, about the pain of it and the injustice of it, and the way it was not what he had made me for, and not what he wanted for me, and not the end of my story. He spoke about my worth, not in abstract terms, but specifically, personally, the worth of Zainab Mohammed from Jerusalem, who was lying in a hospital bed in Mecca. He said I was seen. He said I was known. He said what had been done to my body had not touched the place where my worth lived, because my worth lived in him, and in him it was safe, and it had always been safe. And he said he was giving me a new life, not fixing the old one, a new one. Starting from this bed, from this night, from this moment of complete emptiness and pain, a new life. He said, come. Just that. Come. I said yes in the dark of that hospital room in Mecca, with the tears still on my face and the pain still in my body. I said yes with everything I had, which was nothing, which was exactly the right amount, which was all he had ever needed from me. The warmth that had been in the room when he arrived stayed after he stopped speaking. It stayed through the rest of that night. It was present in the pain and in the tears and in the slow descent into sleep that finally came in the early hours. And when I woke up in the morning, it was still there. Quieter, more interior, but there, like something that had been placed inside me and that was not going to leave. I returned to Jerusalem a different woman. The physical recovery took time. Weeks of managing what my body had been through. The other recovery, the one that does not have a medical name, is still ongoing and I think will be ongoing for a long time. But it is a recovery that is happening inside the presence that entered that hospital room, and that presence has not left. I found an underground fellowship in Jerusalem through a contact I will not name. A small group of believers who meet quietly in a city where quiet is necessary. I was baptized in a private ceremony with 3 people present. I wept through the whole thing the way I wept through that night in Mecca. Not from sadness, but from the particular release of a person who has arrived somewhere. They were always meant to arrive. My family does not know the full story. They know I came back from Mecca changed, and they are watching the change with a mixture of concern and suspicion that I manage carefully every day. I am not ready for the full confrontation. I am not there yet. I am building the faith, building the understanding, building the community, building the strength that I know the full confrontation will require. I ask for your prayers for that moment, for my family, who I love and who I believe Jesus can reach the way he reached me, for the women who experienced what I experienced in Mecca, the woman from Nigeria, the woman from Indonesia, the older woman from Egypt who had known about it for years. I pray for them every day. I do not know if they found what I found in that hospital room. I hope they have found something that holds them. I hope the one who came into my room went looking for them in their rooms too. And for every woman who has been through something that was done to her body that she did not choose and did not deserve. I want to say what he said to me in the dark. Your worth is not there. It was never there. It lives in him, and in him it is safe, and it has always been safe. What was done to you has not touched it. He knows. He was there. And he is looking at you right now with the same looking he gave me in that room. With no shame and with grief for what happened and with love that is specific to you and with an invitation that is open. Come. That is all he asks. Just come. My prayer requests for my family in Jerusalem, that the one who found me in a hospital bed in Mecca would find them in whatever room they are in. For the women I met during Hajj who told me their stories, that they would be found and held, and that what was done to them would not be the end of their story any more than it was the end of mine. For my own continued healing, the physical healing and the other healing that takes longer and that I am still inside. For the underground fellowship in Jerusalem, that they would be kept safe and that they would grow. And for every woman anywhere who is lying in a dark room tonight in pain that she did not choose, may he walk into that room the way he walked into mine. May she feel the warmth. May she say yes. And may she wake up in the morning with something inside her that was not there the night before and that nothing and no one can take away. He is real. He found me in Mecca. He can find you wherever you are.